The 18th rendition of the Royal Rumble took place on January 30th, 2005, from the great state of California at the Save Mart Center in Fresno, California. The event featured 5 illustrious matches, including Undertaker vs. Heidenreich in a casket match, followed by a triple threat match for the WWE title featuring JBL, Big Show, and Kurt Angle, and of course, the Royal Rumble match. This event is known for being home to 2 controversial and highly talked about moments, which are still big talking points within wrestling fans some 20 years later. It is also known as a coming out party for 3 of WWE's biggest stars of the Ruthless Aggression Era, John Cena, Batista, and Edge. But of course, in true Wrestling Uncovered fashion, we will be talking about the dirt. One of the controversial moments in question was when a young Daniel Puder was bullied and ran out of WWE by 3 veterans in Chris Benoit, Hardcore Holly, and Eddie Guerrero. The other is none other than when the chairman of the board, Vincent Kennedy McMahon, tore both of his quads live on pay-per-view following a botched ending just as the show was supposed to go off the air. This Royal Rumble started out completely normal with a solid opening match between Edge and Shawn Michaels that was good but not great. These two, for whatever reason, just didn't have great in-ring chemistry. Next, Vince McMahon booked poor Undertaker in a casket match with Heidenreich. Sometimes Vince really did test Undertaker's loyalty by booking him in just the dumbest matches possible. This match feels like a fever dream as Heidenreich had such a short-lived run in WWE. Side note, I'm going to put together a video on Heidenreich in the near future, so look out for that. Following that match is the aforementioned WWE title match that JBL won, which then sent Kurt Angle into a perk-induced rage later on in the night. Then, Triple H and Randy Orton had a solid 20-minute match for the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, so far, this show consisted of just normal stuff, aside from that random casket match. Nevertheless, we're cruising towards the main event of the evening, the Royal Rumble match, and things got weird immediately following the start of the match. The first 2 entrants in the match were the men that walked out of WrestleMania as champions the year prior, Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. Following them was a young upstart, Daniel Puder, who entered 3rd in the match. For those of you who are not aware, Puder was the winner of the 2004 Tough Enough competition, the same class that featured The Miz. He was well trained in mixed martial arts and carried himself with an attitude in the locker room. On top of that, on a November 2004 episode of SmackDown, he legitimately had Kurt Angle trapped in a submission move and could have broken his arm if he wanted to. Whoever was the agent that put this Rumble together had it out for Puder, clearly. Puder was sent to the wolves here as Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero chopped him mercilessly until his chest started to bleed. Go back and watch this moment. It is literally one of the most surreal things I've ever seen transpire in a wrestling ring. Benoit and Guerrero bullied the guy, or as Jim Ross would put it, gave him an initiation into the wrestling business. After Benoit and Guerrero had their way with him for about 2 minutes, Hardcore Holly's music hit, and he made his way down to the ring as the 4th entrant into the match. Upon entering the ring, Holly said to Guerrero and Benoit, "Can I get him?" To which they obliged. And what transpired next made the attack by Benoit and Guerrero almost look amateur. Holly hit Puder with the absolute hardest chops I've ever seen. He fell to the floor after each chop, quote, selling the move. That was not selling. That man was in agony. Now, could you imagine being chopped north of 12 times by Hardcore Holly as hard as he possibly could? I mean, this is the same guy that had his neck broken by Brock Lesnar and came back from it. This is the same guy that bullied young wrestlers on the first season of Tough Enough in 2001. Holly comes from a different generation, along with Benoit and Guerrero. In their day, that was how things were done. Older, grizzly vets taught young wrestlers a lesson if they felt like they did not pay enough dues, or if they had a bad attitude. Clearly, this situation does not age well, as WWE is a publicly traded company, and they were out here in 2005 acting like it's the wild, wild west. We have not seen anything like this since, with good reason. Now, was Puder a bit arrogant backstage? Sure. That is evident by some of the interviews he's given since his time in WWE. One in particular where he said this, quote, "I was in OVW, and we had this one town in Kentucky we went to every week. It was basically an old barn. There were the same 20 people there every time. They all looked the same. They all had maybe 3 teeth each, and they all had the same name. Finally, one night I walked in and saw all the inbreds and thought to myself, what am I doing with my life? Now, Kenny Bolin, who helped run OVW at the time, responded by saying that was not true and that did not reflect the Daniel Puder that he knew. He went on to state that he was always giving away free pictures, trading cards, and t-shirts of himself to the fans, thus showing a little bit of Puder's arrogance. So Puder gets eliminated, followed by Holly, who was thrown out by the pair of Eddie and Benoit immediately after helping them beat the life out of Puder. Kurt Angle talked about this moment during an interview on the Bubba Army. He stated that Puder was walking around the locker room saying that he's in the main event because he was in the Royal Rumble match. That's clearly a young kid in way over his head. Perhaps this beating occurred because the locker room wanted to stick up for Angle after the incident I mentioned with the armbar. Or maybe it was because he was walking around telling grizzled veterans like Eddie Guerrero and Bob Holly, guys who scratched and clawed their way to get to where they were, I might add, that he's in the main event because he is going to spend a few minutes in the Royal Rumble match. Imagine a 24-year-old punk who got his start in wrestling because of a reality TV show, who has never even worked on an independent wrestling show or an undercard match or anything of the sort. Picture that punk telling Hardcore Holly that he's in the main event of the second biggest pay-per-view of the year because he gets to have a 5-minute cameo in the Royal Rumble match. Yeah, that certainly would not go over well, clearly. It sounds like a combination of several factors. Either way, this was an unforgettable Royal Rumble moment to say the least. Fast forward to the final four of the match. What a star-studded final four it was. Rey Mysterio, Edge, John Cena, and Batista. Now those are 4 first ballot, surefire, era-defining Hall of Famers sharing a ring. Then it comes down to the final 2, John Cena and Batista. The planned finish was for Batista to close the show with his hands raised high, pointing at the WrestleMania sign. However, on this night, that just was not the case. The spot was supposed to go with Cena trying to clothesline Batista over the top rope, and Batista would hold on to the rope, and Cena would go flying outside of the ring. Batista accidentally went over the top rope, and in a 1 in a million chance, the two men landed at the exact same time. And what would transpire in the aftermath of this outcome was something like a movie. An angry Vince McMahon, who had just spent the past 3+ hours sitting at gorilla position, yelling at commentators and interns to bring him steaks, rushed onto the stage to handle the situation himself. He had to handle the situation himself because the general managers of both shows, Eric Bischoff and Teddy Long, had left the arena early. Vince was going to have them go out there and argue over which of their guys won, and then eventually restart the match, which we did see. Prior to Vince storming out there, the Raw ref began raising Batista's hand, and the SmackDown ref began raising Cena's hand, so this would all make sense why Vince wanted Bischoff and Teddy Long out there. This is all based on Jerry Briscoe's recollection of the transpiring events, and I take his word because he was the guy sitting next to Vince after all. Vince screams at Jerry Briscoe for letting Bischoff and Long go home early, then proceeds to march down the stage, beat red in the face, angry as you could possibly imagine with that billionaire strut times 10. And as he slides into the ring, Vince goes to get up, and all of a sudden he collapses and just sits on his ass against the ropes, barking orders at the refs and the wrestlers. Everyone watching along, fans and other wrestlers included, were like, what in the hell is going on? Why is Vince just sitting down like that? As he tried to get into the ring with all that force and anger, McMahon tore not one, but both of his quad muscles. It is still the most remarkable and infamous botch in the history of wrestling, so much so that Joe Rogan knows about it and discussed it with Ric Flair on his podcast. It's a wrestling tale that will never get old. Anyways, the old man is sitting there in agony with both quad muscles torn off the bone, and he is still present in the moment, still running the operation, making sure things go exactly as he wants them to. That is simply remarkable. Get this, Vince refused help and actually walked out of the ring through the backstage area into his limo all on his own. That man is actually insane. He's a legitimate crazy person. He walked from the ring all the way to his limo to have both his torn quads repaired, all because he did not want the wrestlers to see him in a moment of weakness. In a crazy world like professional wrestling, I think there is a need for an alpha male like a Vince McMahon to be in charge. The 2005 edition of the Royal Rumble will forever and always be one of the most notorious. It set the stage for some huge stars like Cena, Batista, Edge, and Mysterio. and then it crowned Batista as the next main eventer and propelled him into a massive feud with Triple H, and is home to 2 controversial moments that are still talked about 20 years later. This show had it all. This show is one of the pillars of my childhood as a wrestling fan, having grown up in the Ruthless Aggression era, and I'm so glad that I got to relive it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Have a great day.